We are continuing our series of debates about teacher skills for the school of the future. And today the subject will be didactic communication. Today we are in London at London University Education Institute, and we want to thank Norbert, Pachler, the director of the institute, that gives us his hospitality.
I think that Antonia asked me to reflect a little bit on the topic of learning, with particular reference to new technologies. And what I thought I'd do is I try and bring together some thoughts that colleagues have expressed in the literature with a view to hopefully being able to enrich our debate and discussion about learning. And I wanted to start off with some work by a colleague from the Netherlands by the name of Kirchner, who in 2006 published his inaugural address and looked in particular at the role of interaction within learning. And I think this links quite well with issues that have been raised earlier in the presentation and in the debate. What Kirchner actually says is that we need to think of various different subdomains of learning, and we need to consider interaction as one very, very important element. He distinguishes broadly four different areas. He says, on the one hand, interaction with others is important, such as peers and experts in pairs, teams, or communities through different forms of external dialogue. So, in order to be able to achieve learning, to bring about learning, to foster learning, what we need to do is build into our programs interaction with others. Then he goes on to say it's also important to factor into our design interaction with oneself on the individual cognitive and metacognitive level through internal dialogue. Then he talks about the importance of the confrontation between internal and external dialogue, including the social relationships that arise as a result of this. And fourthly, the interaction between the individuals and others with the learning, training and social environment in which learning and instruction is taking place. So interaction that is context-bound, that takes on board the broader socio-cultural environment in which it takes place. So here we've got a number of what seem to me quite important statements about aspects of learning based on principles of interaction that we need to take heed of when designing online learning in interactions and environments in order to ensure that effective learning can take place in them. The other thing I thought I'd share with you is some outcomes from a recent study that was published by a body called BECTA, the British Educational Communications Technology Agency, which is sadly now defunct. It was deemed no longer to be necessary by our current government, despite having established a very, very strong track record over the last 20 or so years. And basically, what this report does, based on observations of ICT use in classrooms, is make a number of important assertions. It says, for example, that ICT makes possible new forms of classroom practice, and that this was apparent in three particular respects. On the one hand, the reconfiguration of space move on to the few more slides. Yeah, you change my computer, please. Okay, so we've looked at Kirchner. We've just now managed to get the slides up, and we are looking here now at the vector study. So reconfiguration of space, such as new patterns of mobility, flexible working, and activity management can occur. New ways in which class activities can be triggered, orchestrated, and monitored, and new experiences associated with the virtualization of established and routine practices, such as using multiple documents in parallel or manipulating spatial representations. So we can again see how important it is to look at design elements around interaction indirectly to make learning happen within an ICT-rich context. The research also asserts that ICT creates the possibility of a wide variety of learning practices. For example, exposition, independent research, construction, which is made possible by ready-to-hand ICT-based tools. So again, a number of significant pointers there for us, how we can make use of ICT in order to bring about effective learning. And just very quickly, a couple of other points. We've got the question of how does ICT impact on learning? Well, the research suggests that through ICT, we can actually create new forms of coherence in learning, particularly in three forms: coordination, continuity, and community. So, in terms of coordination, distinct activities of learning can be integrated, and again, virtual learning environments can play a very, very useful role in actually achieving this. Continuity, linking distinct episodes or sites of learning and integrating them, and community, where ICT is used to mediate the links between different people, their interests or activities. Again, underlying this are principles of interaction, but other schools of thought, for example, around communities of practice or other ways of looking at learning, which we're going to do in a minute. So evidence there around the impact of ICT on learning. Then some other things that we know of from research around differentiation, inspiration, coherence. These are all aspects that ICT use can support, as well as, of course, engagement. On that in particular, but what I'd like to look at with you is this particular chart here, which comes from the Crook et al. Study. And basically what they did there is they looked at learning practices and how often they actually were manifest in teaching contexts that used ICT. So on the left you can see things like scripted inquiry, problem-based learning, simulation, case-based learning, collaboration, participation, performative roles, assessment roles, exposition, reflection, construction, ludic approaches, representation, rehearsal, search. So you can see a whole range of learning practices that would tend to take place in a standard classroom, can be supported by ICT, and are being supported by ICT. But what this research shows is that particular types of practices are particularly prevalent. And one of the questions that we really need to ask ourselves in relation to this diagram in the context of this research is, why is it that exposition has got such a high dominance here? And what is it that we are doing with technology? And it would seem here that it is used predominantly to provide input in the way that I'm doing now, for example, through PowerPoints. And the real question is that sort of balance that we're seeing here right? Should we focus in our use of technologies so much on exposition, what about more playful approaches? Ludic here shows on the scale, but only at around about 9% or so. Assessment similarly. When we look at problem-based learning or case-based learning, there is no evidence of it at all. So the basic principle here is that the technology does have a huge potential, in my view, to support a whole range of learning practices, where if we actually then go and look at what people use ICT for, the picture is less encouraging in that transmission-based aspects of teaching and learning tend to be unduly overrepresented in the way people use technology. So that's one thing for us maybe to go away and think about, look at our own practice. It doesn't necessarily have to be like that. I've got 2 more slides now with a very useful table. Unfortunately, I haven't got the source for this table to hand, and I can't let you know where I borrowed this from off the top of my head. But what it does really do very nicely is to show that different types of learning activity can be supported. Assimilative types of learning activity, as well as adaptive types of learning activity through specific types of techniques, concept mapping, brainstorming, buzzwords, crosswords, maps, mind maps, or adaptive learning activities through things like modeling. Then communicative types of learning activities through reasoning, arguing, coaching, debate, and there's a lot of literature on computer-mediated communication where all these things become relevant, as well as we can see, productive elements and experiential elements. And again, the invitation here for us to start to think maybe in terms of these categories on the left, and to explore and examine our own practice to see, okay, where do we tend to use technology, and are we actually spreading our use of technology across these various categories and possibilities sufficiently. If we move into the sphere of online learning, I just wanted to share a couple of models with you, which I thought were quite helpful. We've got the community of inquiry model, Garrison and Anderson from Canada, suggesting that in order for learning to be able to take place in an online environment, what we actually need is to attend to 3 main things. We need to ensure that there is social presence, we need to ensure that there is cognitive presence, and we need to ensure that there is teaching presence. And at the intersection of these 3 elements, these researchers, Garrison and Anderson, suggest lies an effective educational experience. So if you want to use technology online, we need to attend to all these 3 elements in order to make it work. And that, of course, then, has got implications for teachers and their knowledge bases. And one very popular model in the literature at the moment is that by Mishra and Kohler, called technological pedagogical content knowledge. And what these 2 US-based researchers are saying is that teachers not only need content knowledge, not only need pedagogical knowledge, and need to know how to bring pedagogical knowledge to bear on content knowledge in order to make sure that learners actually understand the subject and perceive content to be learnable. But with the prevalence and the introduction of technology, we also need technological knowledge, and this technological knowledge needs to interface not only with content knowledge and not only with pedagogical knowledge, but with pedagogical content knowledge to technological pedagogical content knowledge, as you can see in the very center of this diagram. And that again is, I think, quite a helpful diagram to get us to think about where we individually as teachers are in terms of our skill set and knowledge base to bring about effective learning. So if you look at www.tpck.org, you'll be able to find more about this particular model. And then 2 or 3 more slides very, very quickly. One other way of looking at technology in relation to learning is to say, okay, what might the affordances of technology be in relation to learning? And here I'm drawing again on a Canadian framework by Terry Anderson, also from Athabasca University, who a few years ago put together this particular framework, saying that technology does have affordances in relation to learner-centered approaches, knowledge-centered approaches, as well as community and assessment-centered approaches. And what we really should be doing is to look very carefully at these affordances in all those various areas in order to bring about a successful learning experience. Similar things have, of course, been done in relation to other models of pedagogy. In the United Kingdom, one particularly prominent model is Diana Lorilard's conversational framework. I don't know whether you've come across that, but that's a very prominent model trying to explain how learning best be understood. She posits that conversation, interaction, as we've talked about at the very beginning, is a key element of learning with technologies. And this particular diagram by Naismith et al. Here sets out how technology can offer support both at a theoretical level as well as at a practical level in trying to bring about learning. And finally, of course, there are considerable implications in terms of teachers' pedagogical knowledge. And as somebody who's been teaching mixed mode and online courses for quite a while, I only know too well how important it is for a teacher to develop all 4 of these roles that Berge, back in 1996, delineates. You need a new set of pedagogical skills, new ways of asking questions, new ways of probing, new ways of making sure that lurkers become contributors, new ways of making sure that you as a teacher don't dominate online discourse and discussion through authoritative statements and allow for contributions from the floor and for discussion of the group, whilst at the same time giving participants a sense of enough feedback that what they're actually contributing is along the right lines and so forth. And how that links in with the social domain, developing relationships with your students, some of whom you might never have seen, ensure cohesiveness across highly disparate groups. My group at the moment, for example, has got members in from Egypt and from Brazil and from the UK, from all over the world, and it's very difficult to ensure that colleagues start to gel as a group, as well as managerial issues, remembering to post on time and giving feedback on time, all these sorts of procedural things, as well as technical roles, making sure it all works. So in order to ensure, therefore, that learning can take place in an online environment, I'd like to just bring us back to the opening slide, to which I talked without any visual. It would seem to me that these 4 aspects that Kirchner identifies around notions of interaction, which link to notions of learning as communication, as conversation, which in my own work on mobile learning, Theo alluded to that, also are very prominent, seem to be very important and need to be factored into the planning and design stages. And I hope, Antonio, that addresses some of the points that you wanted me to talk about.
Thank you very much, Norbert. You see, now we have a lot of information on our, let's say, debate. We can go, let's say, through it. We can discuss, but before we go into the debate, I would like to start to introduce David Richardson. He's a colleague from Linnaeus University in Sweden, and is going to make us an introduction of this subject. David, you are welcome to be with us, and light your camera, please. That you could share with us your experience in this area. Okay?
Sure, yeah.
Stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is David Richardson, and I teach in a place called Kalmar in the south of Sweden. It's I have a visual aid behind me on the wall, and because I need to know where my students are, let me just move out of the way a bit. Where that white spot is, that's where Kalmar is in the south of Sweden. Yeah, and I work almost exclusively online with quite a wide variety of different courses. So what I want to do to start off with is to give you around about a 10-minute presentation of different ways in which we could interpret the whole question of didactic communication. And I've given Antonio a bit of a surprise today, because I've decided not to use any PowerPoints, because one of the things that one of the big questions in Sweden has been, is there a special set of skills for online teaching that is completely separate from the set of skills that you need for face-to-face teaching or place-based teaching? I happen to think not. And I happen to think that one of the most important skills that a teacher needs in any context is to be able to communicate with people. And one of the pieces of advice that I received when I made the transition from teaching children to teaching adults was that adults in particular want to communicate with you, the person, without any or with as little media between you and them as possible. So that's what that's why I'm not using pictures tonight, right? Now, if I were to start making a list of all the different ways and all the different means I've got to communicate with my students, it would be pretty long. Another reason why I'm not so keen on just coming here with a bunch of PowerPoints and showing you lots of fancy pictures is because very much the type of communication depends very much on the kind of person you are, the kind of person the students, the kind of people the students are, and also what exactly it is that you're doing at any one particular time. Now, in these series, I work at a small university in southeastern Sweden, but my students could be almost anywhere in the world. And I do a wide variety of courses, from very content-rich academic courses in fields like sociolinguistics and phonetics, where there's a tremendous amount of, if you like, hard information, hard facts that have to be communicated to students, to performance skills-based courses like courses in spoken business English, where the communication has to take place synchronously, and it has to take place in environments which are full of nuances, where students have to convey lots of levels of meaning, and I have to convey lots of levels of meaning to them. So when we're looking at didactic communication in an online environment, we've actually got a whole series of variables that are very, very difficult to pin down and make a science out of, because here am I talking to you as a language teacher. A biology teacher might communicate in a completely different way. A maths teacher might have a whole different set of tools as well. However, if we were to now break this down a little bit into communication which happens synchronously which are, in a sense, when I'm communicating with the other people on this list now anyway, versus communication which takes place asynchronously, which I suppose I'd be doing with anyone watching the recording of this session tonight. I've got there's that distinction first. Very often people think that asynchronous communication has to be in some form of text. Of course it doesn't. What I'm doing tonight for those people watching the recording is communicating asynchronously with my voice, with spoken English or spoken language. We use a number of tools such as VoiceThread, where students can go into a web page and leave a spoken commentary asynchronously, which I can then go back and listen to at some other time, and as can the rest of the class. So asynchronous doesn't have to mean text, although it often does mean text. In the same way that synchronous doesn't necessarily mean that we can see each other, because as some of you know, as I've mentioned before in these presentations, it's quite possible to be in a situation. My picture just disappeared, but I guess I'm assuming Antonio's behind that. Oh, there you go. I've come back again now. It's because one of the environments I work in is Second Life, and the degree to which I am present there is very much open to interpretation. I mean, my subjective experience is just like this. I'm sitting in front of my computer talking to it, but my students' subjective experience is that they are seeing an avatar perform. So in other words, we've got a very wide range of ways of communicating with students. Now, another thing that I learned very early on, and for those of you who've seen me talk before, you'll know that I've actually taught many thousand students online now. So me and my colleagues are just about beginning to work out how to do it. But one of the things that you learn very early on is the increased need for sensitivity towards other people when you're communicating online. If I meet a class face-to-face in a classroom in real life, I've got all sorts of tricks that I can use for in my face-to-face broad bandwidth environment to smooth things over. When I do have courses which are blended, which have face-to-face meetings, as a language teacher, what I'm doing most of the time is trying to instill confidence in the students in their own abilities to perform in English. And if you think about how do you instill confidence in people on a face-to-face basis, well, you know, we human beings have got lots of tricks for that. We've got very sophisticated eye contact, for example, and in the same way I can pick up signals from my students a lot easier because it's instinctive to us humans. We've been doing it since we were babies. On the other hand, when I'm online, different matter. One of the very difficult aspects of teaching online is giving people feedback that may not be entirely positive, like when they've done something which is a misunderstanding or something which is going way off on the on a tangent, and you have to bring them back. Now the question is, yeah, you don't have all these really sophisticated body language things to do. You have your voice to some extent, but what about if it's if this is a text-based didactic communication? So in other words, what I've discovered over the years is that firstly, I have to be a great deal more clear than I would be if I was talking, if I was meeting a class in real life. Exactly. If I say something that the class isn't following in real life, even if there are 500 of them, I can see from the expressions on people's faces directly. I can feel the atmosphere in the room that that bit needs explaining better. But very often online, you don't get those signals coming back quite so quickly, if at all. So I think the first skill that an online teacher needs is the ability to express him or herself very clearly. The second thing, of course, is when you are expressing yourself clearly, to be very careful about people's feelings. Because if I just go in and say, you're wrong, you've made a mistake here, you made a mistake here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here. Yeah, okay, well, they're not going to come back next time, are they? And you can imagine what it's like when their performance is oral, and they've just geared themselves up to make a presentation in a foreign language that they're not very sure of, and then the teacher comes in and starts pulling it to pieces. So that's the kind of thing those are the sorts of skills which I think an online teacher needs to develop. Now, to finish off, I started off by saying that I don't fundamentally believe that there's a different set of skills for face-to-face teaching from online teaching. It'll be interesting to see what the other participants have to say. But it's more like it's the same skills, but you have to develop them to a much greater degree if you're going to work online like this. So, Antonio, I hope that's a useful start to the discussion. Whilst we're waiting for Antonio, do you have anything to say to what I've just said, or anything?
Yeah. I was surprised when you start your presentation without any power presentation, but I love it because you express a lot things and ideas. One of the idea was clear for me and new for me is that when we're talking about asynchronous communication, it's not necessarily text. It could be voice recorded in offline time. Then it's a good idea because many times we put together asynchronous and text. And the other question that I like to share with you is how do you support the body language in online courses? I mean, we can do any body language. Then how we can reinforce or to supply this?
Yeah, I mean, you could see when I was talking, I was having great difficulty keeping my hands still and great difficulty, like, you know, not getting a bit animated and things like that. But I think it's oh, hello there, Antonio. You're back. We just have me and Xavier just carrying on with the conversation whilst we're waiting for you, right? Yeah, because so in other words, but I think in my experience, what you have to be aware of is that everything has to be a lot clearer. So if I'm going to make a gesture, it can't be a little one like this. It's got to be a big one like that. I was quite fortunate in that when I was learning to be a teacher of English as a foreign language about 25 years ago now, a lot of my practice lessons were actually videoed, even in those days. And when they stopped the frame, and you said you found yourself doing, I'm going to talk about two things today, and they'd say, two? Oh, right, yes, that too, you know. I'd just like you to look over there, over there, you know, over there. So do you? How on earth are they going to understand that? You know, so in some respects, I had quite a good grounding.
Okay, David, thanks very much.
I thought I'd also very quickly give you an example of how. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know. I can't hear who's talking at the moment. Yeah. Let me just give Xavier a quick example of a typical voice thread activity.
Sorry, David.
Now, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm not sure who's speaking
Antonio,
at the moment.
Please.
But I'll tell you what. Give me just
I don't know.
just give me a moment, and I'll just give you a.
Some bandwidth difficulties. Okay, please. No problem.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just give you one example, Xavier, of a voice thread asynchronous activity. Now, I'm going to start a course in a couple of weeks on sociolinguistics, right? And I want the students are actually all on campus, but they're on a different campus, so I'm going to do it all online. Now, I'm going to send them off to do some fieldwork tasks. For example, interviewing somebody who uses 2 languages on a regular basis about what they use one language for and what they use the other language for. Now, on the Thursday of each week, we're going to have a live Connect session, 2 hours. But before then, I want them to record a 2-minute report on the findings from their fieldwork task by, at the latest, Wednesday evening. So on Thursday, when I'm preparing for this live session, what I will very quickly go through the groups and hear a series of 2-minute presentations about what they've done, so that when we then go into the live session, I know, first of all, what kind of issues to pick up on. I know that they've all done it as well, and when we get into the Connect session, I'll be using breakout rooms quite extensively so that they can develop their presentation to the other people in their group in somewhat greater detail. And this is mostly to make sure that they're picking up on the concepts involved. And that's a model which I think could be reapplied to lots of different subject areas. Okay, Antonio, I'll hand over to you now if you're with us.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Antonio, for the invitation, and welcome everybody wherever you are on this globe. I'm talking from Innsbruck, from the Innsbruck University, being a coordinator for the Innsbruck Media Studies research group here at our university, and also into philosophy of education. That's one of my main fields I'm working on. So I'm going to focus on some conceptual issues today, when Antonio asked me to bring a few thoughts about the idea of microlearning. So what's it all about, and why could it be important, and what's the main, let's say, interesting thing into it. See how can I, this one is closed here. If I'm able to move the slides, so let's go change view. I have to put this away. See, the slides are not movable now. Now it's working. Okay, so here's a little overview, and I'll cut off a few bits and pieces just to tell you where my thinking comes from, and that's starting from a wider angle, as I mentioned, also with the idea of philosophy of education, and then coming down to the issue of didactics of microlearning and what's the questions at stake there. So looking at the points of departures, there's a big discussion going on about contextual issues, such as which are the most important trends and the societies we are living in. And there are so many different society descriptions going on that sometimes it's hard to focus on the appropriate descriptions, or just to choose which aspects or which combinations of aspects are important. So we are in a dilemma here. We have to decide on the one hand where to start from which basic ideas, be the knowledge society or world society or information society or whatever, and on the other hand having focuses on what's going on there. We still have a time, I think we are facing many techno-promises and also educational lags in terms of what we could do, also in the sense of developing new pedagogies and not just staying with old ideas of pedagogies. So that's a little bit of a background where I'm embedding my basic thoughts about microlearning. And the idea, if you haven't heard of it, is somehow related to the micro-teaching idea, which is old. It's a few decades ago when, in the early 70s, and late 60s when this idea of micro-teaching was developed with short units which have been evaluated very often with being videotaped in advance. So the micro-learning is somehow corresponding, dealing with relatively small learning units, and the important word in this sentence is the relatively small learning unit, because it's depending on the frames and also domains of reference if we are developing micro-learning concepts. The main thing is that there are somehow two discussions going on. In one area, if one talks about micro-learning, it's just related to micro-content and to a kind of a web jargon. But I'm thinking of it more in terms of relating it and embedding it into different didactical models, settings, or also designs. And I think this approach is more fruitful than versioning e-learning as it's common in programming, like 2.something or M-learning 0.9. Maybe today we are at M-mobile learning, I don't know, 1.5, and all these ways of talking about it. I think it's problematic to some extent because it's too much related to technology, too much focusing on this technology, and exactly not focusing on the type of skills David just mentioned. So I think microlearning offers new paradigmatic perspectives on learning processes in mediated environments. Of course, there are also critical voices, one of the main points, I think, is the issue of the trivialization of knowledge processes. It's also, if you talk of distributing education, for example, I don't think that such a thing is possible, because all these learning and knowledge processes have to be developed on the side of the learners or learning actors or instances, and cannot be just implemented or somehow forwarded or distributed. Another issue related to microlearning is these bits and pieces in terms of creating flickering minds, as Oppenheimer put it in one of his books, or using edutainment, for example, as a kind of a cuss word or a dirty word, and not making use of the positive aspects of the somehow, how could I say, convivial aspects of educational processes. So these critical voices, I think one has to consider that, but that's no reason to just, throw out the baby with the bathwater. And it's also not just the talking about the new digital options we have in terms of microlearning. Microlearning has a long tradition, as one of my colleagues pointed out earlier in one of his articles. It's just got to be rethought. And I think there is a need for new didactical developments. So this is a table here that's just giving one brief idea of options, how a relational concept can be developed. You can have many more different examples like this. Just to make clear what you're talking of. For example, if you take a sociological approach, then having groups on a meso-level focus, for example, or the learning of generations, of a generation as a whole, which is normally somehow out of sight if one talks about the individual learning processes. So if you distinguish levels like that, there's a different conceptualization of microlearning in relation to, let's say, linguistic approaches of single letters or words or letter picture or figure combinations and so on. So according to the famous saying of Nelson Goodman, there are many worlds, if any. There are many microlearning concepts, if any. As to didactics, one can further develop all these traditional notions on didactics. And I don't know if you're familiar with it. In the German-speaking tradition, there is a special approach which is called communicative didactics, which has been developed by Karl Hermann Schäfer, Klaus Schaller, and also Rainer Winkel. So this is one approach among other approaches which are referring to learning theories or to educational theories or to curricular or subjective aspects or constructivist approaches and many other more. So this tradition of a communicative didactic is on the one hand specialized, and on the other hand it can be conceptualized as a general topic for all didactics, and that's maybe a thought we can discuss later on. Here on the slide there is one triangle, in this case not referring to the traditional didactical triangle, but to a group pedagogical triangle, referring to the theme-centered interaction as Ruth Cohn developed it. So one can develop these microlearning didactics within these traditional approaches, and of course also in various instructional design settings, but I think there are also new ways of conceptualizing didactical processes, not just in terms of, let's say, individual settings or institutional settings, which are discussed on another level, but also in the sense of having aggregation processes of bits and pieces or conglomeration processes, and also emergence models, when new phenomena, coherent structures and qualities evolve from and between microlearning elements themselves. And that's a way of didactical thinking which, as far as I know, isn't very far developed at the moment, and that could offer new ways of dealing with these topics, and in that sense also, let's say, encourage teachers to develop let's say, concepts and also practical forms of teaching and learning. So, to sum it up, if we are able to make use of the use of media for educational purposes, we have a wide range of options for creating didactical settings, of learning processes. What else is important? If we look at the popular cultures and the school environments, at least in the German-speaking countries, these popular cultures aren't let's say, valued in their in terms of education. But I think there are options in it, and there are especially options of bridging these cultures with formal and informal learning contexts, which we can develop when we start thinking about learning in terms of microlearning, mesolearning, and macrolearning. And of course, there is a kind of a tertium datur. If we look at the traditional view on knowledge and learning in terms of a reliable, long-term knowledge and also very harmonious, idealistic ideals of education versus the technologically driven digital fluency, there are options in between which we can develop. And I think if we develop them as education in terms of bricolage, there are good chances for the school of the future. So here's a book we edited on this topic. If you want to learn more about it, I think it's still very up to date. There's also a contribution from Norbert Pachler and Gunter Kress in there, and I'm happy to answer questions or comments, whatever's coming up now. Thank you.
Thank you, Theo. As always, you put a lot of interesting things on the table. And related to your, let's say, your remark about learning is a bricolage process, I should quote another colleague that says that teachers should be today multimedia wizards, and schools should be factories of dreams and skills. But let's keep this for the debate. And now I would like to introduce you, Professor George.
Hello, George. Thank you very much to be with us in one new session about teacher skills for the school of the future. Today we are going to talk about didactic communication, and the stage is yours. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I guess one of the challenges that a lot of educators have faced really over the last, think about it as far back as you can, but it's that we are trying to find ways that we can better improve the experience or the overall learning experience of the learners. And there's some development in a variety of fields, one of them being in what's now called the learning sciences. And the learning sciences are essentially this multidisciplinary field that brings together work from neurosciences. It brings together work that's coming out of general learning psychology and a few other disciplines as well, some of them partly related to really the flow and the nature of communication and interaction. And what these theories, or what this discipline at least is putting forward, is that there are better ways that we can understand how students learn. That for much of our discussion around education, the focus has been, trying to make sense of topics that we don't fully understand. And so we have a variety of theorists that go back, 100 or even 150 years, theorists in education that have tried to provide a description of how learning occurs. Now, a lot of these theories are exactly that. They've been theories. And so what started to happen more recently is that the researchers, under the umbrella of learning sciences, have started to tackle the more empirical orientation around learning. And so part of the goal is to get a clear sense of what's happening through the teaching and learning process, and what's the impact of that process in terms of how we teach and the approaches that we take in the educational context. Now, it's important to emphasize that, whenever we start looking at concepts of learning, there's a lot of existing theories that are being challenged. For example, for a long period of time, there's been a fairly vigorous debate around the topic of learning styles. And there have also been some reports that have come out that have largely criticized or been critical or even outright dismissive of what learning styles means. We've had some theorists, for example, like Howard Gardner, that has advanced a concept of multiple intelligence. And in each of these instances, there is, new or ongoing research that's maybe not calling exclusively into question, but is certainly trying to provide a more rigorous foundation that we can use to plan our teaching. So, for example, Howard Gardner, just as an illustration with his views of multiple intelligence, the question becomes, if this theory is accurate, and if there's research that supports that we have different types of intelligence, that we can express ourselves, through mathematical spatial intelligence, or I think it keeps growing. At one point, I think it was 7. I believe he's up to about 9 multiple intelligences now. So the question becomes, if we get an understanding of what these principles of learning are, what do we do as a consequence? If we get a better understanding of how let's say something as complex as human memory. If we have a clear understanding of human memory and the processes that influence our capacity to memorize, the big question for any educator is, what do we do different? How do we teach differently in order to make a more significant impact for the individual students? Now, some of these theories that have been advanced, let's say, within the domain of learning sciences, certainly have a solid or at least a growing research base. For example, MIT has started to initiate what they would look at as their first year physics courses or program. And instead of taking a pure instructional method, the teacher lectures at the student sort of duplicates and tries to make sense of that information. What they've started to do instead is take an approach that is far more exploratory. And so what they're trying to encourage students to do is, in the process of interacting with each other and in the process of conducting experiments, they're really trying to make sense of complex phenomena. And so if we take this theory of learning sciences and, namely finding a greater empirical basis for understanding what improves learner success, and we look at models such as what MIT has been starting to do, we also look at other school systems that are starting to use certain levels of technology, such as clickers in a classroom, all with the intent of getting a deeper, more comprehensive understanding of how learners are developing. Then I think we can end up perhaps trying to form a basis or a model that we can take from learning sciences that have greater impact to an individual educator in a classroom. For example, in this work, I should mention within learning sciences, it's coming from multiple trajectories. So it's not that there's just sort of this one area of exploration. Even if you consider the work that was done in the 90s, coming into early 2000, around the concept of situated cognition, or that came from the perspective of distributed cognition, there's been an emphasis within the learning space that really promotes the diversity or the complexity of learning. So rather than saying, if we take a group of students, put them in a classroom and lecture at them and they learn, we try instead to say, what are the real life implications of this? How do people remember things in a real life context? What's the impact of video on the teaching and learning process? Or even additionally, how does the quality of learning differ from a text-based versus, let's say, a video-based versus a simulation-based learning activity? And these are the questions that a fairly wide variety of researchers are trying to tackle, namely to make learning more of a authentic experience and obviously one that's more effective. But the consensus on this is still doesn't exist. For example, I mentioned learning sciences a fair bit, and there have been some strong publications that advocate learning sciences. But there's also a level of research going on in more of the math or science fields as well. For example, Carl Wyman out of University of British Columbia has started to do some work in the teaching and learning process. And one of the things he's tried to do is advance and really try to develop a comprehensive understanding of what's involved in teaching math. And his principle is using the concepts of math or concepts of science to teach science. So very much an empirically grounded approach, use of clickers, use of simulations. So that's the model that they've adopted. So I guess really what I'm trying to advocate here to conclude is that there's a variety of approaches. These are influential and significant, and we need to improve our ability to integrate some of the emerging research into our teaching and learning practices. But even now, the answers aren't quite as clear as I think we hope as educators.
Thank you, George. I think you put a lot of interesting topics on the table and allows us to debate on them. It was a pleasure as always. We'll meet in our next debate. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
I would like to listen to João Xarep. João Xarep is, let's say, an expert on voice. And as an expert on voice, I would like you, João, not to use video, but just to use your voice to show how important is the voice on a debate. Please, João, we would like to hear your opinion about the importance of the voice in communication. Doesn't matter if it will be in a presence classroom or if it will be in an online environment.
Hello. Hello, António. Hello, António. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me for this meeting. It is a big pleasure here from Portugal to meet you all. Well, talking about voice, it is always something that... Hello? Talking about voice, it is always something that people generally are not very used to be so sensible to this subject. During these years, teaching voice in different levels, in artistical and not artistical also. It's been quite an experience for me, and I think for this experience, people also start to get more interest about this subject. And
Could the other participants light their cameras, please?
Sorry?
Go on, João.
Okay, thank you. So, some studies have been made about the impression that we have from other people about the voice. And there is a woman named Jo Estel. She's a pedagogical vocal teacher. And the study she have made, she found...
Laura, you are welcome to show your camera, please. And Paulo. Go on, João.
She found, like, we have the impression of the others around 38%. It's the image that we have from the others found in the voice. So there is different factors that can affect our voice, physical, emotional, also environment and psychological, that can affect our voice. In an online environment, or pursuing this subject of didactic communication, I think most of all important is the expression that we can transmit with our voice. This expression is I think is the thing that touch most of all the people. Of course,
Sure. Tell me, let's say, if my expression should, let's say, in my voice, yeah, I wouldn't have any expression. I would just speak very flatly. I just like this without emphasizing any aspect. And what does it makes in one classroom? Does my students will start sleeping, or doesn't he pay any attention to me, or things like that? Can you comment this?
Yes, that's that kind of speech. It's not It's not very nice on the on teaching, and there is lots of teachers with that kind of problem, and that can be very bad and useful for the message that we want to the students to listen. And there are different methods and different ways of approach to the voice, and I think the most important of all is you can be dynamic with your voice, not only at the level of the volume, but also of the intensity and rhythm that you speak. Can be more interesting.
That you should use a different semantic when you are writing, or when you are speaking, or when you are presenting slides, or should it be the same?
No, it's different. It's different. Even the language that you may use on a speech, you are more connected to the phonetic aspects of the language that can be more interesting to the persons who are listening.
Okay. Paulo, could you comment this, please, about the use of voice, the use of presentations complemented with non-verbal communication and things like this? What do you think? You are, let's say, using all these type of tools in your lessons. Can I listen to your experience on this, please?
Yes, of course. Hello, everybody is hearing me? It's okay? The sound is okay? Okay. Okay, I have, we don't usually have to read on the classrooms, but we have to speak and we have to address, we use PowerPoints, and sometimes we have to explain. So, during 50 minutes, regardless of what you have to know, what you have to pass to them, you must be, like, how do I say, a performer. I have to keep their attention for 50 minutes when I'm doing my classes in here, and so I have to express myself in such terms that I must keep them interested in what I'm saying, and I cannot do that with a monotone voice, like I'm speaking about databases, so you got no way. So I have to be more, I would say, more flashy. I'm more energetic. I have to speak with my hands. Well, we all Latins do that. We can speak with our hands. We can show things. We can. Now listen to this. Look. Can you see? Right. You have to do right. So we have to adopt a lot of expressions. We cannot be just like speaking. We have learned this not by any methodological study, but by using it. Sometimes we see when we are more depressive, we go to the classes and all the students are also sleeping in the morning. Everybody's sleeping. What we say goes through their ears, just down their arms onto the paper, and nothing stays in between. So you have to be like more flashy. You have to almost jump in the classroom and speak loud and speak slow and speak to this one, speak to everyone, so everyone wakes up and pays attention. Sometimes they laugh.
What a dynamic presentation.
Yes, almost like this in the classrooms. We have to keep everybody awake. So we have to adopt several tones of voice. What I do sometimes for myself is pick up a book and read it with expression. To myself, not loud, not reading out loud to anyone else, but reading with expression. It's different when you read the text just reading for understanding. Or
let us listen to the opinion of Mario. Mario is a catedral teacher at Lisbon Medical School University, and he used to give his lessons in virtual environment. He has a lot of lessons recorded and published about his cardiology course. Mario, can you share with us your experience on using monochordic voice or dynamic voice
All right.
when you are
good
making
afternoon.
your
It's a
videos?
pleasure to be again with everybody. I'm quite impressed concerning the amount of knowledge that we can really have in this complex area.
Yes, now it's okay.
What I may add in my experience is that unfortunately it's not enough to have these techniques available. Students, at least my students, and at least until now, are not quite excited with these techniques. I'm in a position where I'm trying to figure out what can I do to attract more students to this type of tools that I think are quite important for the present and for the future. Any ideas will be welcomed, and because it's really very important that we do not have only ideas, that we are able to make the ideas work in our daily activities. Thank you very much.
Mario, I can make you a suggestion. Maybe you will not catch all of your students, but you will catch part of them. If you get an assistant, a nice, beautiful girl, maybe you will get your lessons more exciting. Okay, let's talk more seriously. Xabier, is the same problem in Basque Country, or you have different problems or different suggestions?
Well, I am a traditional teacher. I deliver traditional lectures in the classroom, face-to-face, and also I am teacher in online environments. Then I need to put together some technologies and some methodologies. In this session, I learned a lot because I am newer in this area about didactic communication. I take some notes, and later I would like to put like a summarize or just to remind us what we are talking. But I have a question for all of you that is about the new technologies in the case of the social media. I would like to know your opinion about how to use the social media for educational purposes. Because yesterday I read a post in Twitter, for example, 6 educational uses of Twitter. Then I would like to know your opinion because it's a microblogging. I don't know if it is micro learning. I saw in one of the slides of Norbert showed us.
Which one of you would like to take this question? About social media.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me? Fine, I think my connection is too slow today. Okay. First of all, thanks all of you because I think there have been very interesting points in this debate, and I agree with most of you because I'm very concerned with teachers' commitments with e-learning and virtual environment. And I think that this kind of environments, I mean, when we can communicate talking and listening, not only writing, I think that it's very, how can I say, very near to the student. They feel very close to us. Sorry, they feel very close to teacher because they can find that we have bones, you know, that we are real person, not only a virtual machine or something like that. And also these kind of environments I think that are very useful for debate like this because we can communicate with people from different parts of the world and people that are interested in the very same things, and this is very important because we don't need, although I love traveling, but we can't spend always so much money traveling, so this is a very interesting way of using technology. And thank all of you. I have liked, especially when you talk about the speaking manners and so about speaking low or fast, or how students can understand us in that way. So thank all of you, and that's all. And sorry because of the camera. Sorry. I'm sure I'll try to solve my problems.
I can give one very brief example about how I tend to use social media. One of the courses I teach is a technology and language teaching and learning module on our MA TESOL. And one of the things that I make extensive use of is social bookmarking. Throughout the year, I collect resources, web-based resources, that deem relevant to me for my students. I make sure that I tag them in a way that makes sense to me. And in the course of my teaching, then I'm able to share with my students relevant web-based resources of all kinds, be they online tools, be they background reading, be they journal articles, be they newspaper cuttings, be they software applications, a whole wide range of things, be they examples of exercises and activities that teachers have produced. And that allows me then to make sure that the information and the resources that I use are dynamic and up to date. And it also means that in terms of specific preparation, I don't have to spend an awful lot of time trying to remember where I came across some excellent examples, but I've got them readily to hand. And I'm able to allow my students to contribute to the online database of relevant links by setting up special interest groups within my social bookmarking environment. I happen to use Diego for that. They're able to set up RSS feeds from tags if they're interested, for example, in I can give one very brief example about how I tend to use social media. One of the courses I teach is a technology and language teaching and learning module on our MA TESOL. And one of the things that I make extensive use of is social bookmarking. Throughout the year, I collect resources, web-based resources, that deem relevant to me for my students. I make sure that I tag them in a way that makes sense to me. And in the course of my teaching, then I'm able to share with my students relevant web-based resources of all kinds, be they online tools, be they background reading, be they journal articles, be they newspaper cuttings, be they software applications, a whole wide range of things, be they examples of exercises and activities that teachers have produced. And that allows me then to make sure that the information and the resources that I use are dynamic and up to date. And it also means that in terms of specific preparation, I don't have to spend an awful lot of time trying to remember where I came across some excellent examples, but I've got them readily to hand, and I'm able to allow my students to contribute to the online database of relevant links by setting up special interest groups within my social bookmarking environment. I happen to use Ego for that. They're able to set up RSS feeds from tags if they're interested, for example, in any